Welcome to this lesson on methods for solving a quadratic. And today's method that we're going to go through is factoring and the zero product property. So let's take a look at a quadratic. So say I have this quadratic. X squared minus 2x minus 13 equals 2. So I've been given this quadratic. Now my first step in solving a quadratic is I have to get it equal to 0. I have to get it equal to 0. Right now it's equal to 2. So I have to get this equal to 0. So I'm going to add a negative 2 to both sides. So now I have x squared. I'm going to change this to plus a negative 2x plus a negative 15 is equal to 0. Now I have my quadratic equal to 0. So now my next step is to factor this quadratic to be able to solve it. Well, to factor it, the way that we would do that, make our generic rectangle, take the first term, plug it into one corner, take the last term, plug it into the other corner. Then we make a diamond problem. In our diamond, we multiply this diagonal, negative 15 times x squared, which is negative 15x squared, and it goes on top. So we multiply this diagonal, goes on top of our diamond. Our portion that goes on the bottom of the diamond is negative 2x, which is the middle term of our quadratic equation. So now I have those. So now my goal is to think of two numbers that will multiply to negative 15x squared and add to a negative 2x. Well, after much thought, all right, I have negative 5x and 3x, because negative 5x times 3x is negative 15x squared. Negative 5x plus 3x is negative 2x. So now I'm going to take those two numbers, negative 5x and 3x, and place those into my other two blank spaces in my generic rectangle. So I have negative 5x and 3x. Next, use my generic rectangle now to factor this out. So I look at x squared and negative 5x. What do those two things have in common? Well, what they have in common is x. So I can pull an x out of those two out here. Well, if this is x, for this to be x squared, I have to multiply by what to get x squared? Well, what I have to multiply by is x. Well, if this is x, for this to be 3x, that means this has to be 3, because 3 times x is 3x. And then 3 times what would give me a negative 15? Well, that what is negative 5. So now this factors, my quadratic here factors into x plus 3 times x plus negative 5 equals 0. Now, this is where the zero product property comes involved. Because if I have something times something equals 0, that means either this has to be 0 or this has to be 0. Because 0 times anything is 0. So either this one has to be 0 or this one has to be 0. So that means x plus 3 will equal 0 or x plus negative 5 will equal 0. So what plus 3 is going to be 0? Well, I know that that is negative 3. So x is negative 3, or what plus negative 5 is 0? That what is 5. So I know that x is negative 3 or x is 5. And that's our method using factoring in the zero product property to solve a quadratic. So we have our solution is that x equals negative 3 or x equals 5. Right, so let's just do one more here. All right, let's just do one more, and let's do the equation 2x squared plus 19x plus 9 equals 0. Now again, when I'm factoring or solving a quadratic, I always have to get my quadratic equal to 0. So this one is already equal to 0, so I'm already one step ahead. So now I need to factor that. Well, the way that we factor, again, is with our generic rectangle and our diamond. So let's fill in what we know. Our first term, our x squared term, goes in one corner. Opposite that goes our last term, or 9. We multiply this diagonal, and that's what goes on top here. So 9 times 2x squared is 18x squared. And then our middle term goes here in this bottom spot. Our middle term here is 19x. That's going to go over here. So I'm going to have 19x. So now to solve this diamond, what will multiply to 18x squared but add to 19x? Well, 18x and x. So I'm going to have 18x and x be my other two spots of my generic rectangle. Now I need to look for a common factor between 2x squared and 18x. What would be a common factor or something that they have in common that I could pull out of each one of these? Well, 2x squared and 18x, they have 2x in common. Well, if this is 2x, for this to be 2x squared, 2x times what is 2x squared? Well, 2x times x. And x times what is x? Well, that what is 1. And 1 times what is 9? That 1 is 9. And then 9 times 2x is 18x, so we must have done something correct. So that means now I have factored this into 2x plus 1 times x plus 9 is equal to 0. Now here's where our zero product property becomes involved. And so we know that either 2x plus 1 has to be 0 or x plus 9 has to be 0 for this to be 0, because something times something equaling 0, one of these two has to be 0. So we know that 2x plus 1 has to equal 0 or x plus 9 equals 0. All right, well, this one's easy. What plus 9 is 0? What plus 9 is 0? So I know that that is negative 9. Over here it's a little more complicated because we have 2x plus 1 equals 0. So we may need to solve this. Well, our methods for solving, get rid of the 1 on this side by adding a negative 1. So I get 2x is equal to negative 1. Divide by 2 on both sides. And I get that x is equal to negative 1/2. So my solution to this is that x equals negative 1/2 or x equals negative 9. And that is my solution for this quadratic. 2x squared plus 19x plus 9 equals 0. My solution is down here. X equals negative 1/2 or x equals negative 9. I hope this helps, and I hope that you are encouraged in solving a quadratic using factoring or the zero product property.